ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ, ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ, ਉਹ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਉਹ 5 ਲੱਖ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਬਾਹਰਲੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਾਲਾਨਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ, ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀ, ਅਜ਼ਾਈਲਮ ਸੀਕਰਸ, ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਨੇ? ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਕ੍ਰੈਪ ਕਰੋਗੇ? ਔਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਯੈਸ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ, ਕਈ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਰੀਅਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਦਾ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨੇ, ਔਰ ਖ਼ਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲੋਟਰੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ 'ਚ ਫਰਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਆਰ ਯੂ ਪੁਟਿੰਗ ਐਨੀ ਕੈਪ ਔਨ ਦ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ? But we want to understand that on one side, international students are bringing a lot of revenues, billions of dollars. On the other side, Canadians are saying that limit the number of the new immigrants or newcomers, including students. So cap is not possible then. इसी मैं उन्होंने दस्या सी कि लोग मुड़ गए ने, बहुत सारे लोग रिवर्स इमीग्रेशन हो गई। मैं उन्होंने सवाल पूछा सी कि 67,000 ਲੋਕ ਤਾਂ 2019 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ ਸਨ, ਹੋਰ ਲੋਕ ਜਾਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਟੇਨ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਘਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੰਕਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਮਹਿੰਗਾਈ ਵੱਧਦਾ।
The Harjinder Thin Show.
ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਆਨਰੇਬਲ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਮਾਰਕ ਮਿਲਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਤੇ ਦੱਸਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਲੇਟੈਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਹਨ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਡੀਟੇਲਸ ਕੀ ਨੇ। Minister, good morning.
Good morning to you and your listeners.
Thank you very much for joining us, Minister. Could you please elaborate on your decision on the targets of immigration? Are you changing anything or they remain to be the same?
We're keeping things stable for the next 3 years. So we've been really ambitious as a government in making sure that we're filling labor gaps and contributing to the economy. And, looking at the numbers and the analysis we're hearing from economists, I think it was smart to sort of stabilize the numbers at 500,000 for 2026.
So are you concerned about it that people are going back, but you're bringing another 500,000 people? Infrastructure is limited, so what's going to happen then?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. Always concerned. I had a chance to speak to the authors yesterday, and what they're signaling is that, the reasons for people not choosing to stay in Canada, although it's still a very small proportion, are ones that we need to look into some more detail about. It is of some concern to me, but what I'm also seeing is a record number of people wanting to come to Canada. So with that, you obviously have people that have a choice. When you talk about economic migrants, these are people with a lot of capital, and often they may choose ultimately to go somewhere else. Canada does actually compete for really, really skilled people. And it's something that we have to keep being aware of. We're a welcoming country, but sometimes people choose not to stay. The vast majority want to stay, and there's even more that want to come here. What we're also seeing, and obviously you mentioned infrastructure challenges, construction challenges, housing issues. What people need also to realize is that the people that are building these large, ambitious infrastructure projects are immigrants. And if you talk to the construction industry in particular, we need 100,000 new jobs. Most of them, or a good chunk of them, will come from abroad in order to actually build all the things that we need to build as a country. So there are two sides of this equation that we need to look at when we make the calculation about how many people that we welcome to Canada.
No, we understand your welcoming policy, but the same token, if the people, newcomers, new immigrants are facing the housing crisis and the inflation is out of control, they wouldn't stay here. They will go back. Are you planning to, is there any strategy to retain them?
I think we've offered Canada as a country of hope, and what we need to do a little better job of is matching the hope to the actual skills that people bring to the country. It makes no sense to have a doctor or a lawyer or a skilled tradesperson driving a cab or doing labor that is less well paid for their capacity, and that's real work that we need to work, in particular with provinces, on accreditation of skills. In BC in particular, and it's important to note that the British Columbia government under Premier Eby has put together an accreditation process where there are more than 24 trades that will be looked at, and skills that will be looked at in order to make sure that they are recognized when they are acquired abroad. So that I think is a really good development. We need to do this across Canada. It's always and that'll make people feel more welcome because they come here with a skill set and will actually be able to deploy those skills in the jobs that they need. And we need that. So my point in all this is we need to do a better job in giving a more comprehensive process of welcoming people to this country.
Minister, according to one survey, 44% of Canadians are expressing their desire to limit the number of immigrants coming to Canada. So are you putting any cap on the students?
Well, what we've looked at, and that's a really important question, is my job as the Federal Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship is first and foremost the integrity of the system, to make sure that we are addressing the clear cases of fraud that we see across the system. That's why a week ago I announced the process whereby we will be verifying applicants' letters of application to make sure the institutions actually issued the letters that people are presenting to our visa officers. So turning up the verification process in one way and making sure that we're working with institutions, higher education institutions, to make sure that they are welcoming students in the proper way so that those really bad actors we can then turn to and punish. I don't have all the tools to deploy. The provinces control a good part of the institutions that are designated. In British Columbia in particular, they have done a bit of a better job in making sure that the designated learning institutions that ask us to issue visas are actually legitimate. But there's a lot of work to be done across the country because what you have is some bad actors that are playing with people's hopes and dreams abroad and bringing them to Canada, taking their money and then running away with it. And that's something that we need to curb.
But we want to understand that on one side, international students are bringing a lot of revenues, billions of dollars. On the other side, Canadians are saying that limit the number of the new immigrants or newcomers, including students. So cap is not possible then.
Well, if you put in a cap, you end up punishing everyone. So you punish the University of British Columbia, you punish McGill, you punish the University of Toronto, you punish all the people that are actually doing this in a relatively responsible way. So what I'm saying is we need to use a little finer tool set to do the surgery with this, and that's going to require a bit more patience, but it's also going to require specific targeted public policy to make sure that the bad actors are actually punished, so that everyone isn't paying the price, and that the really good quality international students aren't being stigmatized. So that's something I'm very, very careful of when I look at what we do to maintain the integrity of the system.
No, we appreciate your policy that the government is announcing immigration levels have remained consistent and they will remain consistent. Could you clarify whether international students, temporary foreign workers, refugees, asylum seekers, they're all included within the existing figures or they're separate?
It's separate. You know, every November 1st, the law requires me to submit to Parliament levels and projections with respect to permanent residents. And so the temporary foreign worker category, although people tend to confuse it in terms of the numbers, is a separate process. And I think that's important to understand. That's why there's a lot of publicity under the permanent residency numbers this time of year. But tackling the real challenge of temporary foreign workers that we have gotten addicted to as a country is something that is a very important next step that we as a government need to work to make sure that we are doing this in the right way. Wage depression, people that are exploited, those are all issues that we need to tackle as a country, whether you're the.
So let's understand then the real numbers that over and above the, let's say, 500,000 the level you have kind of committed, these international students, refugees, and temporary foreign workers, they are over and above that 500,000. Is that correct?
They are over and above that 500,000 number. Although I would caution you when that number is used, because some of the temporary foreign workers have a pathway to permanent residency and are incorporated eventually into that 500,000. So that number has to be looked at carefully. And obviously, many of the temporary foreign workers don't remain in Canada, nor are they entitled to remain in Canada and end up returning to their home countries. But again, those numbers are ones that we have to look at in a little more detail. I think we can get a little more refined in how we look at those statistics and look at what you're referring to, which is the impact on the healthcare system, the impact on our infrastructure, the impact on housing, and that is work that will continue over the next year.
And Minister, many applicants find themselves repeatedly taking English tests like IELTS, etc., incurring costs and delays. Are there any plans to streamline and improve the language efficiency test?
Well, obviously, anytime we can streamline things, it's something that I want to look at quite keenly. Clearly, the ability to work in English or French in Canada is very, very important. I feel, and I get a lot of legitimate pressure from my colleagues in Quebec who want to make sure that everyone can speak French, but it has to be done in a way that is fair to everyone involved. And so, when we look at these areas where we see some of the process being not as good as we expect, I'm always interested as a minister to look into it and see if we can make it better.
And also, people want to know that how long the impact will remain on the application process for the exit of diplomats from India.
Yeah, and that's a difficult issue to really predict. Our best sense of things is that from here to December, the ability of our officials that have remained in the face of what we believe to be an unfair expulsion of diplomats from India will be cut in half. So if we were predicting 38,000 files to be processed by December, we will only be able to process a little more than half. And the best information that I have is that is holding true for the time being. What we have tried to do is obviously adapt without knowing really what the future holds, to make sure that we process about 90% of the file capacity outside of the host country, in this case, India. But there are some things that we need to do on the ground, and those abilities are hampered by what we believe to be an unfair decision by the Indian government to ask us to remove a good part of our diplomatic corps.
Minister, there are a lot of complaints about the unfair lottery system and parents and grandparents program. Apparently, the applicants are not picked up fairly by these categories. This experiment has failed, as a matter of fact. Would you scrap it?
I wouldn't say it's failed for those who have had the good fortune of being selected. What I do acknowledge is that we do put a ceiling on the number of parents and grandparents every year. It's part of the levels plan. We've increased that progressively over the course of the past few years, which I think is good. People want to be reunified with their families. We've also instituted a process where people can get a 5-year super visa to be here with their kids. I think if you recall, and sometimes memories are short, but if the first come first serve process was wildly criticized as well, and so
Yeah, Mr. Hussain changed that again. It's changed again. I mean, they've been changing and experimenting on it.
Yeah, and look, it isn't an ideal world. Many countries use the lottery process. The reality at the end of the day is we have many more applicants than we have the capacity to accept, and that's something I understand and acknowledge is frustrating. But these are within the levels that we set as a country, and can we always make this look like it is fair? I'm always willing and open to look at it.
Minister, anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Oh, just all my best to your listeners, and I wish them a great weekend.
Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
Anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, maybe you didn't hear me, but I just wanted to wish your listeners a great weekend, and thank you very much for the opportunity to chat.
Oh, thank you, Minister. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye. ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸਨ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਨੇ, ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਸਵਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੈਪ ਲਾਓਗੇ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਹ ਫੇਅਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਸਾਰੇ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ ਲਈ। ਔਰ ਹੋਰ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਪੁੱਛੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ, ਇਹ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ, ਉਹ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਉਹ 5 ਲੱਖ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਬਾਹਰਲੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਾਲਾਨਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ, ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀ, ਜ਼ਾਇਲਮ ਸੀਕਰਸ, ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਨੇ। ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅੱਡ ਨੇ, ਓਵਰ ਐਂਡ ਅਬਵ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਨੇ ਉਹ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ 5 ਲੱਖ ਦਾ ਟੀਚਾ ਜਾਂ 4,25,000 ਦਾ ਟੀਚਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਗਲੇ 2024 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 2025 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 2026 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟੀਚੇ ਮਿੱਥੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ 'ਚ ਜੇ 5 ਲੱਖ ਤੱਕ ਦਾ ਟੀਚਾ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਆਉਣੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀਜ਼ ਆਉਣੇ ਨੇ ਅਸਾਈਲਮ ਸੀਕਰਸ ਆਉਣੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਆਉਣੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਦਾ ਪੈਥਵੇ ਟੂ PR ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਪੱਕੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਫਿਰ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਪੱਕੇ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ 5 ਲੱਖ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਨ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ 44% ਲੋਕ ਤਾਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲੈਵਲ ਘੱਟ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੰਸਿਸਟੈਂਟ ਰੱਖਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਆ, ਇਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਉਨੇ ਰੱਖਣੇ ਪੈਣੇ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਕ੍ਰੈਪ ਕਰੋਗੇ? ਔਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਯੈਸ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਈ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਰੀਅਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਖ਼ਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲਾਟਰੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ 'ਚ ਫਰਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਐਕਸਪੈਰੀਮੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤਜਰਬੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਇਹ ਫੇਲ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਤਜਰਬੇ ਨੇ, ਕਦੇ ਲਾਟਰੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਕਦੇ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਫਸਟ ਕਮ ਫਸਟ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਵਾਲਾ ਸਿਸਟਮ। ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚੇਤੇ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਸਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਲੈ ਆਂਦੀ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਲਿਆਉਂਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਪਰ ਇਹ ਤੋਂ ਬੈਟਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਤੇ ਨਿਰਭਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਅੱਜ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਮੇਜਰ ਐਲਾਨ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਕਰ ਦੇਣ ਪਰ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ 'ਤੇ ਕੈਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗੇਗਾ। ਯੈਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਜਾਂ ਟੈਂਪਰੇਰੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਵਰਕਰਸ ਅਤੇ ਰਿਫਿਊਜੀਜ਼ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਉਹ 5 ਲੱਖ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਨ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਟੀਚੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰੱਖੇ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ 44% ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਟੀਚਾ ਘਟਾ ਦੇਣ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਟੀਚਾ ਉਨੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲੈਵਲ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਉਨੇ ਹੀ ਰੱਖੇ ਨੇ, ਵੱਧ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਜਾਣ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਰ ਸਾਲ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਟੀਚਾ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲੋਂ 5-4 ਹਜ਼ਾਰ 10 ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਵੱਧ ਹੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਘਟਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਨ। ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਲੇਬਰ ਮਾਰਕੀਟ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਇਮੀਗਰੈਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਇਨਫਰਾਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਚੱਲੀ ਸੀ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਮੁੜ ਗਏ ਨੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਰਿਵਰਸ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਗਈ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ 67,000 ਲੋਕ ਤਾਂ 2019 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ ਸਨ, ਹੋਰ ਲੋਕ ਜਾਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਟੇਨ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਘਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੰਕਟ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਮਹਿੰਗਾਈ ਵੱਧਦਾ। ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਢੁੱਕਵਾਂ ਜਵਾਬ ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਘੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਟੀਚਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੇਸ਼ੱਕ 44% ਲੋਕ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਘੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ। ਇਹ ਲੈਵਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਸਥਿਰ ਰੱਖੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ 'ਚ 5 ਲੱਖ ਤੱਕ 1 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵੇਂ ਇਮੀਗਰੈਂਟਸ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਆਉਣਗੇ।